Logan Paul just dropped an embarrassing response to George Janko's podcast where he tries to dispute the claims made against him. The GameStop stock has been rallying, almost doubling in value over the last 2 days. OpenAI has just released their new GPT-4 Omni, with OpenAI also teaming up with Apple. And more on today's episode of Things I See on Twitter. Logan Paul just dropped a 4-minute response to George Janko's podcast. In this video, Logan Paul goes on to dispute a bunch of the claims that George made with text messages and receipts.
I had to start my own show because we're not making money on this show, and I'm getting pushed on.
You made money on the show.
I can show you my books. I was spending 10 G's a month being on the show.
All right, let's talk about this. Obviously, I wasn't on the podcast to represent myself, so I'd like to clarify a few things that were said. As well as having his own credit card, all expenses related to the show were paid for, including all travel and lodging. Obviously, George's total reimbursement came out to $20,000, 317 cents. I'd love to see any books that show otherwise. Spending $120,000 a year to be on a show is a little confusing.
So over here, we can see that Logan goes to dispute George's claim of him spending $10,000 a month to be on the show. What Logan fails to do is provide the full context of the clip. I don't know if Logan was too lazy to watch the whole clip or the podcast, or he just had his publicist and PR team just tell him what to say. But if we look at the full clip, we can see that George Janko is referring to a specific moment in time.
When Logan came after me for my religion, the show hit rock bottom and we weren't getting paid. I was getting paid $5,000 a month, and that's covering just Reed. I have a mortgage. I have my sister that works for me. I have Belle. I'm trying to get married. I had all these things. So I had to start my own show because we're not making money on this show, and I'm getting pushed out of this show.
At the time we were making money. You made money on the show.
But at the time, we're a couple months.
How much money did you make?
I can show you my books. I was spending 10 G's a month being on the show.
So Logan conveniently just cuts all this out to manipulate the audience and prove his point. And Mike also further proves this by saying at the time. So Logan just conveniently cuts around this to manipulate the audience. But let's keep going.
This is a guy who's sending us screenshots of $11 million a week that he's making.
This statement is so crazy that it's almost laughable. That would mean I'm making $572 million a year. I'm nowhere near that. What happened was Prime had a very successful month. I think we did like 60 to 70 million, and I sent it to our group chat because I was proud of the business. I was stoked to show the boys, and I think George maybe misinterpreted that as like my personal income.
So Logan did make 50 million a month. Now, whether you want to say that's gross and it's not profit and this and whatever, 50 million is 50 million. When you're paying your friend pennies and you're showing him $50 million checks, how's he going to feel? If I'm George and I'm getting underpaid and treated like shit for being on a podcast that I'm on with my friend, and he's showing me $50 million checks while I'm getting underpaid, how's that going to make me feel? And George didn't say that Logan makes $572 million a year. He said he made 11 million in a week. This is not saying that Logan makes 11 million every single week. Anyone with common sense and a brain should understand that Logan probably doesn't make that kind of money every single week. So I don't understand Logan's point. He's trying to disprove George's point by proving George's point by saying, yeah, I did make 50, 60 mil.
The show hit rock bottom and we weren't getting paid. I was getting paid $5,000 a month.
But you did make a sizable amount of money on the show.
And by the way, I'm just grateful. I was always grateful.
Like that?
Yeah, I don't like talking about money.
I know he doesn't want to talk money. I know he believes it out, but George made $317,000 in the 15 months that he got paid for on Impulsive. The work requirements consisted of about 3 days a month, 3 hours each day, traveling the world, networking, and meeting some of the coolest people ever. It comes out to about $2,300 per hour, and he also had 10% equity of the entire show.
George admits to saying that he did make good money and he was grateful for the money he did make. But that $5,000 a month he cuts out was at a specific period in time when he hit rock bottom. He didn't say he was making $5,000 a month the whole time.
When Logan came after me for my religion, the show hit rock bottom and we weren't getting paid. I was getting paid $5,000 a month.
And what Logan also does here, by exposing George's earnings to the world, $300,000 a year is amazing money by anyone's standard. But what Logan does here is really smart, because now he's just exposed how much George made, and most people are going to watch this saying, what the fuck is he complaining for? He's making $300,000 a year for sitting on a podcast and just talking. Now he's getting the public on his side by exposing his earnings. What, he's complaining about $300,000 a year? Is that what he's complaining about? You see, like, Logan uses these manipulation tactics to trick the audience, because from the audience's perspective, it's a lot of money. But to be honest, I don't think George got what he's worth. And if we look at it, 3 days a month, 3 hours each day, travel the world. We're not talking the prep he had to do before coming on to the show. when you have a guest on, you got to do a bit of research about the guest, what topics you're going to discuss, things like that. And traveling as well. We're not talking the time spent traveling. George Janko lives in LA. Logan Paul lives in Puerto Rico. So now we're talking going to the airport, jumping on a flight, packing your bags. Like, you have to factor this stuff in. Logan just uses these snaky, sneaky little tactics in there, manipulates certain words and the context of the footage and the way he navigates around these issues. He's very smart. There's no doubt about it, the way he does shit like this. Let's keep going. Let's see what else Logan has to say in this fucking bullshit PR response.
Not you, not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody called me when I got fired.
George did not get fired. He quit. I'll touch on that in a second. But after he quit, I called him frequently. I reached out. I wanted to reconcile the friendship. I invited him to my birthday party and WrestleMania and even my ranch a few weeks later. He chose not to come. He also unfollowed all the people he mentioned on Instagram, which is maybe why they didn't call him. I don't know. I can't speak for them, but he still does not follow them to this day.
Now, Logan once again cuts out a very important part of that clip, because right after where Logan cuts it, George says Logan was the only one that called me.
Not you, not Caleb, not Kevin, not Dylan. Nobody fucking called me when I got fired. Not one person called me. You know what I get a call from? Logan saying, at least Mike wouldn't do this.
But Logan conveniently cuts right before it. Now, either he cut before that intentionally, or he didn't even see the whole thing and his team are giving him instructions and he's just a fucking puppet on a string. Because these are the smaller details the audience isn't going to pick up on. Now, again, I have to give credit where credit is due. George not responding to the text messages is a bad look. I have to say fair play on Logan for texting George, and we can see there's a lot of text messages. He texted him quite a few times and it was completely unresponded, left on read. So, you know what, I'll give props to Logan as much as I don't like him.
And then on my birthday, you guys shot 3 episodes so I couldn't show up.
The 2 episodes he's talking about, not 3, were shot 4 days after George's birthday. His birthday's on January 3rd. We shot those episodes on January 7th. We were already in Vegas signing the UFC to Prime, and as we do, want to capitalize on the location and our use of time and energy and the guests in that city. George didn't come to work because he wanted to spend time with his family for his belated birthday, which I totally understand and we even praise.
One of the things that I love about George, he prioritizes his family and friends over anything.
Now, once again, we're getting into a he said, she said situation. George is saying something different and Logan is saying something different. But the third person in the situation, Mike, did not dispute what George said on the podcast when he was with him. He didn't dispute it. Now it's kind of like, who's actually telling the truth here? And at the end of the day, if it was George's birthday and he couldn't make it for whatever reason, they have a guest on. They have to value the guest time. You know what? I'm actually going to side with Logan on this one. If they had a podcast booked on a specific day on a certain time, it's a very bad look for you to back out of that and waste the guest time. The show's got to go on. Sometimes if you're booked in, you're booked in.
I got my show going, and then not only was I controlled and pushed around on impulsive, but then Logan's making calls and directing my show. He told me that I couldn't take Celsius.
So this is the big one. Making calls, trying to make it seem like I wanted to control his show is absolutely ridiculous. As you can see right here, I was like, hey, we got to get you Prime because I saw him drinking our competitor and he told me to call him. He was filming my reaction to tell me he took a deal with a competitor. I told him, please don't film. Like, I'd like to talk about this. I hope you're joking, by the way. The truth is, I thought it was a bad look that my best friend and co-host took a brand deal with our competitor without consulting me, asking me, giving us even a chance to match it before he signed the deal, because the audience that he's building, at least at the time, on his own podcast was being funneled directly from the podcast that I was building with him. I said, hey, dude, I understand you need to make money. The entire text is right here that I sent him after our conversation, because I did understand his position if he needed to make money, but I thought it was also a little odd because he did make $317,000 in 15 months. Regardless, I did tell him I can't have him on impulsive if he's going to take the deal with the competitor, but if after he makes some money he wants to come back to the podcast, he's more than welcome.
Logan completely forgets to mention the part where George said,
I get that call and I tell him, I go, Logan, I get it, bro. And I fully told him, I go, listen, man, like, I will take half the deal that Celsius gives me. Half. If you want to put it on the table for my show, a quarter, work with me. He says, I won't pay you a dime. You're here because of me. And then I said, well, what do you want me to do for my bills, bro? I got no money. And he says, go have your rich dad pay for it.
Logan completely ignores that. He completely ignores that. And 2, if we look at the text message between George and Logan, there's no brand deal being discussed here. All Logan is saying is, we got to get Prime on your podcast. He's not saying, we got to get Prime on your podcast and we'll pay you and we'll help fund your show. He's not saying that. So there's no deal being discussed in these text messages here. All he said is, we got to get you Prime. We got to get my product on your show so you can promote it. There's no money being discussed. There's no deal being discussed.
The truth is, I thought it was a bad look that my best friend and co-host took a brand deal with our competitor without consulting me, asking me, giving us even a chance to match it before he signed the deal, because the audience that he's building, at least at the time, on his own podcast was being funneled directly from the podcast that I was building with him. Regardless, I did tell him I can't have him on Impulsive if he's going to take the deal with a competitor, but if after he makes the money he wants to come back to the podcast, he's more than welcome.
Now for this, I see both sides of the argument. I'm not going to side with either one, because at the end of the day, if George needs money and for whatever reason he's not getting a deal with Prime, he's not getting a deal with Logan, he's not making enough money, you got to do what you got to do. If that means he's got to take a brand deal from a rival company, if you need the money, you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you're helpless. I can't necessarily get mad at George for doing that, but then I can't get mad at Logan as well, because at the end of the day, he's also got to look out for his business, and that does make sense. George got a massive boost from Logan's podcast. He got a massive following, so there's going to be a lot of overlap in the audience. So to promote a rival brand to Logan's audience, it does make sense. I do see why Logan would not want that. And then if we see this text message here as well, he is saying to George in a polite way, like, you got to get the fuck off Impulsive if you're going to promote a competitor brand. But I get it from a business standpoint as well from Logan. And I also get George's point as well. You got to do what you got to do sometimes. And again, he's talking about, oh, I thought it's odd that George needed money because he made $300,000 in 15, 17 months. He forgot the fact that George has employees. He's getting married. He's got a mortgage. He lives in LA, a very expensive city. George has his own podcast to run. It makes sense. You can't sit here and say, I thought it's odd because George makes $300,000. But he's also got expenses that match that income as well.
There's a lot more. I'm not going to get into it, but this isn't to say, by the way, that I didn't fuck up along the way. I did. I should not have mocked his beliefs. I apologize for that. I should have stuck up for him with Bobby Lee, and I definitely should have had his back more like a friend. There's a lot of things I would have done differently, but here we are. It saddens me that our story has unfolded this way. I wish him nothing but health, wealth, happiness, all the success that he wants, and I hope that one day we can sit down and have a relationship and a conversation.
And that's it. So Logan Paul completely forgets to talk about the fact that they cut the Bobby Lee episode to make George look worse. He forgot to mention, you're not going to get a penny from me. If you need money, go to your rich dad. Cut clips out of context to make George look worse and trying to justify his points and trick and manipulate the audience. And if you think George is still lying, we had Mark Donor, a friend of Logan and George, and he reacted to this, backing up a lot of the things that George said.
It's me apologize to this man, or I don't have a job on Impulsive.
Sounds about right. Something he would say.
This is a guy who's sending us screenshots of $11 million a week that he's making. Okay? And on top of that.
So with that sucks. I mean, I used to make $1,000 a month working for Logan. He paid for my rent. Granted, I slept on an air mattress in a closet. Super grateful for it. It's all part of my journey. I wouldn't be where I am today without all that. I had to pay my dues. I remember him telling me one day in the gym, he showed me a screenshot of his Shopify, and he made like $1 million a day for 3 days straight. Super happy for him, but I get what George is saying when George is claiming to not be getting paid. He's making $5,000 a month, and his boss is showing him that he's making $11 million a week.
He's backing up what George is saying, because the same happened to him when he used to work for Logan, when he was friends with Logan. Now, does everyone tell the same lie? Everyone around Logan eventually ends up leaving and talking bad about him.
When I get that call and I tell him, I go, Logan, I get it, bro. And I fully told him, I go, listen, man, like, I will take half the deal that Celsius gives me. If you want to put it on the table for my show, a quarter, work with me. He says, I won't pay you a dime. You're here because of me. And then I said, well, what do you want me to do for my bills, bro? I got no money. And he says, go have your rich dad pay for it.
Sounds like something he would say, to be honest with you. It's such a weird thing. It's like, I don't know how to... Logan said that to me before, like, I'm the reason you're here. Definitely puts himself above everyone.
Does everyone tell the same lie? I've been saying for the longest time, Logan's a piece of shit. He's a fucking piece of shit. You have his friend who used to live with him from back in the day, who stopped hanging out with him, backing George and agreeing with him. And Logan done a good job fooling everyone on his reply to George Janko. Logan done a good job. He's very smart. He knows the social media game. He knows how to manipulate the footage, edit the footage. He has a PR team. He's good at doing this shit. But moving on to the GameStop rally. Over the last 2 days, GameStop has almost doubled in value, similar to what happened in 2021. And behind this is Roaring Kitty, the one who kickstarted the movement back in 2021. He made a post on the 13th of May on X, which received over 20 million views and started the rally back up. So basically, if you guys don't know what's going on with GameStop, it's basically seen as a meme stock that a lot of hedge funds and large investors and institutions institutions have been shorting to make money, fucking over people like you and me. And Roaring Kitty is known as the one who started this whole movement. Back in 2021, he realized there were a lot of hedge fund managers, hedge funds shorting the stock, and he started a movement which got everyone to buy the stock, raise the value of it, so these large hedge funds couldn't make money shorting the stock, causing the hedge funds to lose money and retail investors like you and me to make money. This gained massive traction on Reddit, on social media. The news was covering it. If you look at the charts, there was a massive spike. And back in 2021, a hedge fund, Melvin Capital, lost $3 billion and had to shut down because of this. Now, if you guys don't know what shorting or short selling is when it comes to stocks, so let's say I have a friend named Bob and I borrow a bike from Bob. I say, Bob, I want to borrow your bike. He goes, all right, sure. So now Bob's given me a bike. I go to George. I say, George, I'll sell you this bike for $50 and I'll buy it back a month from now with the hopes that the bike goes down in value. So what happens when you're short selling is you get the bike from Bob, you sell it to George for $50. Now you get the $50. Now a month comes around, the bike is worth $20. So I say, look, George, the bike's gone down in value. I'll give you $20 for the bike. George goes, all right, that's the price for the bike. Fair enough. We had the deal. $20 it is. So now with the $50 I made initially from George, I pay him $20 for the bike. And now I have the bike and I have $30 profit. And then I go back to Bob, the one who I borrowed the bike from, and give him the bike, pocketing the $30. That is basically what happens when you're shorting a stock. These large hedge funds borrow stocks from brokers with the hopes that the stock will go down in value. So they borrow GameStop stock from the broker and they sell it to George for $20 a share. And then a month later, they buy it back for $10 and they keep the $10 difference and they give the stock back with like a little fee. That's what happens when you short a stock. Now, who loses when this happens? It's regular people like you and me who are invested into the stock market. Roaring Kitty was the one who kickstarted this movement back in 2021. He realized these hedge funds are stealing money, basically. They're basically stealing money. And he went on Reddit, he had a YouTube channel, and he just started telling everyone to buy GameStop. And it rocketed up in value. Now, the opposite is also true. So if I sold the bike to George for $50 and now a month later the bike goes up in value, I say, hey George, it's been a month, I'll buy that bike off you. And now George goes, the bike's gone up in value, now the bike's $100. Now I have to pay $100 for the bike because I still owe it to Bob. So now I've got to pay $100 for the bike, lose $50, and then give Bob the bike. If the bike goes down in value, I make money, but if it goes up in value, I lose money. So this is what people started doing. They just started buying the stock and holding onto it and refused to sell. So the higher the stock went, the more these companies lost money. And over the last 2 days, the stock of GME has gone up almost double, causing hedge funds to lose $1.3 billion. But what these stockbrokers done today, as GameStop was skyrocketing, they stopped the ability for people to buy. So people could not buy the stock because these brokers don't want the hedge funds to lose money because they work together. This is literally just market manipulation going on. And you had Twitter just going crazy over this. You had Andrew Tate saying he was going to buy $1 million worth of GameStop. And this is all done to fuck the corporations. This is why this is so big and massive. They don't want people like us to make a bit of profit on the stock. So they literally stop our ability to buy. But this is only the beginning. And Roaring Kitty, back in 2021, the founder of this movement, this guy turned $50,000 into $50 million. Insane amounts of money was made. And moving on to the last story, OpenAI just announced their latest GPT-4o, stands for Omni. Now, I've been using ChatGPT-4, the paid version, for like the last 2 months or so. I use it to help me with my videos, titles, research, scripting, all that shit. But this GPT-4o is twice as fast and it's going to be free, as well as announcing that they will be teaming up with Apple to incorporate ChatGPT into Siri. OpenAI are making massive moves. It seems like they're really trying to outdo their competition when it comes to Google, when it comes to Perplexity, when it comes to all these other AI competitors. I've been playing around with it today, and this thing is insanely fast. So you can feed it some text here and it will put it in an image, whatever the prompt is. Now, again, it's still not perfect. If you look, there are some errors in the text. It can translate language in real time. It also has emotion when it talks to you now. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. This one actually kind of creeped me out. It has emotion. I don't want the robot talking to me and laughing I'm fine just typing that shit out, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be speaking to the thing. That creeps me out, man. That creeps me the fuck out. As well as being able to do math equations, it can read charts and analyze charts, as well as your surroundings. In real time, you can get your camera out and it will analyze your surroundings and tell you exactly what's around you. That's been it for today's video. Subscribe to stay updated and click on the other ones on the screen. Fuck off.